These are the first set of notes for the oceanography unit, the ocean water properties notes. And the PowerPoint shows you different days that we're going to do the notes, so we're just on day 1 with the ocean water properties. Oceanography is the study of the oceans. This includes the physical characteristics, chemical composition, and life forms of the ocean. Oceans cover over 70% of the Earth's surface, so that should tell you that less than 30% of the Earth is actually made up of land. So the oceans are an integral part to the whole world. And then here are the 4 major oceans. You will need to know the oceans' locations if you don't already know them. We live right here by the Atlantic, so this whole area all through here is called the Atlantic Ocean. And then the Pacific Ocean is over here as well as over here, because this is a flat map and we have a round world. So the Pacific Ocean borders over here, and then thinking about it as a circle, comes all the way over here and interacts with our west coast. And then the Arctic Ocean is up here at the top, and the Indian Ocean is here by India, which is right there. There is no Antarctic Ocean, only 5 oceans. Some main characteristics about each of them. The Pacific is the largest and the deepest ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is the second largest, and it borders us, North America, South America, Africa, and Europe, so it's fairly long. And then the Arctic is located around the North Pole, and the Indian is pretty much the smallest ocean. So on your notes, I would just make a couple of quick jotted down notes about each of these. The main thing is about the locations, that you know that. And then seas. We have some main seas marked on here. Perhaps you know what their locations are. I won't ask you about the different types of seas though. A sea is a small area of salt water that is partially surrounded by land. Submersibles are underwater research vessels, just like the Alvin and the Jason. If you think about in the Titanic movie, when they take the old lady down to see where the ship sunk, they're in a submersible because it's a research vessel. So now we're going to get into the properties of ocean water. 96% of water in the ocean is pure water. The other 4% is dissolved minerals, also known as salts, and gases. What's in ocean water? Salts are washed into the ocean from rocks and soils on land by rivers and streams. Oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide are important gases found in the ocean. And we've talked about all of these things, except for perhaps these gases, but we know that they get in the water from being around in the atmosphere. The same gases found in the atmosphere, just like oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. Elements found in ocean water include, these are very important for you to know. Notice here sodium and chlorine make up the largest amounts, which NaCl is salt, so those two put together make up the salt, which is in the ocean. Magnesium, sulfur, calcium, potassium, bromine, carbon, strontium, and boron are the main ones. What's in ocean water? Temperature plays a vital role in the amount of dissolved gases in the ocean water, and this is also really big for you to realize. Cold regions have a larger amount of gases than warm regions. Just like when you go outside and it's cold, you kind of huddle yourself together to keep yourself warm. Gases do the same thing. As they get cold, you can fit more into a certain area than when it's warm. Because when it's warm outside, just like you kind of spread out. And that's the same thing that the gases do. Salinity is the amount of dissolved salts present in a sample of ocean water, which is described in parts per thousand. It looks very similar to a percent sign, but instead of having just 1 0 on the bottom, it has 2 zeros on the bottom. So the average salinity in the ocean is 34.7 parts of dissolved salts per 1,000 parts of seawater, which we round to 35 parts per thousand. This is that sign for parts per thousand that I was saying. Kind of looks like a percent sign, but has the extra 0 on the bottom. Salinity decreases with precipitation because that precipitation is fresh water added into the salt water, so it's going to decrease salinity. And then salinity will increase with evaporation because as you evaporate the water, the salt gets left behind, so that makes the salinity increase. So thinking about hotter regions, the salinity is going to be higher because evaporation is probably going to be higher. And these are also really important concepts for you to understand as well. Salinity differs in various regions. I sort of started talking about that. Salinity is going to range from 33 parts per thousand to 40 parts per thousand, depending upon where you are in the world. And then the temperatures. Almost all energy that heats up the ocean comes from the sun. So think about where most of the heat is probably going to be. Based on temperature changes, scientists divide the ocean into 3 temperature zones: the surface zone, the deep zone, and the middle zone. The surface zone is where the warm water is because of the sunlight, and that's also called the mixed layer. And then let's talk about what causes it to mix. Wind and waves mix the heat evenly throughout the layer, but we're still talking about just the surface. It still doesn't go down very deep. The surface zone varies in depth and location, again, depending upon where you are. The equator temperature is on average 30 degrees Celsius, whereas the poles, the North and the South Pole, both are at -2 degrees Celsius. But think about 0 is the freezing point. How is it possible that the North and the South Pole can be at -2 degrees Celsius and it still be water? Hopefully you're saying it has to do with the salt, because the salt is going to lower the freezing temperature and allow the water to stay at a liquid when it gets below that average freezing temperature of 0 degrees Celsius. The surface zone can extend up to a depth of 300 meters in the tropics. And then here's the deep zone, very cold water without sunlight. So there we're talking about, think about in Finding Nemo, when they go down to the bottom of the ocean and it's completely dark and then they run into that fish that has the light on his head and that chases them. That would be the deep zone. And then the middle region is between the mixed and the deep, and that's where the temperature changes rapidly because it starts to get to the point where there's not a whole lot of light. The thermocline. And this is where the temperature, thermocline, is going to change. So due to the lack of sunlight at certain depths, temperature can drop dramatically. The zone of water where temperature drops is the thermocline. And then here's a picture of it. You've got the surface layer up here at the top, and this is the temperature. And then they hit the thermocline where the temperature drops really quickly, about 400 meters. And then from there, it drops very drastically into the cold temperatures. And then water density. This is going to be the big thing for our lab. Water density is going to increase with colder water because the colder it is, the more molecules you can pack into an area. That makes it more dense. And as the salinity increases, because the more salt you have, the higher the density. And then with this, the density of the water masses, this is the density, and then that's versus the salinity and the temperature. So you can see about, 27 degrees Celsius. The salinity is about 34 parts per million, or parts per thousand rather. And then as we change the temperature, or drop the temperature and increase the salinity, the density is actually increasing. And then talking about the color of the ocean. The color of the ocean is determined by the way light is reflected or absorbed. All colors of the rainbow are absorbed, with blue being the last color absorbed, so that's the color that our eyes will see. And then since it's the last color absorbed, our eyes see blue. Let's see if I can kind of move this stuff around so you can see the words there. So again, because it is the last color absorbed, our eyes see blue.